Last time on Dude, you haven't played this game! Naturally, there's a two-player mode, which is the real meat of the game when it comes to replayability.
Oh, but none of my friends are here.
I'll play with you. Actually, I'm Shadow Miketendo.
Balljacks.
Say, why don't we make this interesting? Loser goes to the Shadow Dimension forever?
Let's do this!
Looks like my dreams just came true. Enjoy the Shadow Dimension, Miketendo. Sayonara.
Oh no!
Now that I've stopped Miketendo by sending him to the Shadow Realm, I, Shadow Miketendo, can rescue my master and bring him back to life. And why, do you say? Well, so he can capture all the women of the world and turn them into his slaves. Now, in order to do this, I need to remember the spell. I think it went something like this. Come, masters of the earth, dwell from hell, bring up, rise up. Ashes to ashes, dust to dust, Klaatu, Velveeta, necktie? No, that can't be right. Uh-oh. Looks like I made an oopsie.
Meanwhile, in the Shadow Realm...
This isn't so bad. I mean, at least I've got some Halloween games to keep me preoccupied here in the Shadow Realm. Yep, we get it. You've got chesticles.
Did someone say chesticles?
You again? Wait a minute. You're not Dracula.
No, he is my cousin. We play racquetball on Tuesdays.
Okay, and who are you again?
I am getting impatient. This skit is taking way too long. I have Pop-Tarts that cook in less time than this. Let's just skip this skit. Because, after all, it's Halloween!
Now, most of you know I'm a huge Castlevania fan, and today we're going to be talking about a game that not many people are talking about. And thanks to the people at 46akumen.com, we're actually going to be able to play a fully translated English patch of the game, which is awesome. I mean, who knew 20 years later that we'd be able to do that?
Rusty was released on the PC-98 and MS-DOS in 1993. However, it's mostly remembered for the PC-98 release. The PC-98 is a Japanese computer system that was a continuation of the PC-88 series. These computers were released by NEC from the original PC-88 lineup until the evolved versions, which went up to 32 bits. They're mostly known for dating sims, the Toho Project series, am I saying that right? Shooters, visual novels, and plenty of adult-oriented titles, sometimes a weird combination of the latter three.
And sadly, since the PC-98 is very expensive and this game is nowhere to find online, I had to emulate it.
Anyways, Rusty was developed by a company called C-Lab and is considered a Castlevania clone or homage to Konami's action platformer series that goes bump in the night. But are these bumps worthy of a nightcap with you? Rusty's story begins hundreds of years ago, as we open to a cutscene full of flashing dark skies and a mansion on the hills. Meanwhile, inside, we see demon gazes peering from every direction, as we get a flicker of light and a leather-clad vampiress, and a short description of our story. Grinning from ear to ear, she walks through a sea of blonde-haired female shadows, as we learn of the seal that has been broken. Count Marquis de Monte Carlo, the previous ruler of Transylvania, has returned from his sealed prison.
That's me, Count Marquis de Monte Carlo!
Hey, does Dracula know that you're calling yourself the ruler of Transylvania?
He can't have Castlevania and Transylvania! Okay, he lets me have beach parties there on the weekend, alright? You happy?
Beautiful, youthful ladies have been disappearing from villages all over. We cut to a mysterious green-haired woman as she...
Jeez!
Lusty, more like BUSTY, you know what I mean?
We learn that this woman is the titular... Ooh, that's a poor choice of words here. Heroine of this adventure. And as the opening credits roll, we see a series of confusing images that,
Wait, her name is Vasti Sprinkle?
Yep.
What kind of a name is this? It's like an ice cream sundae that give you lockjaw.
Yeah, well, you've got no room to talk. Your name sounds like a sandwich at Bennigan's.
The story really isn't that thrilling here, and aside from these racy images, there's not much to grip you in the way of intense story. I applaud the developers and the recent translators for helping us to be able to flesh out the basic concept. Monsters are capturing women, and a lone hero or heroine must rescue them. This trope is pretty standard in action games of the 90s, but if you're here for an engaging story, you've come to the wrong place. Rusty has about 9 stages of platforming goodness to get through, and these levels are certainly not easy. The locations are all familiar, yet refreshing as well. From villages to cemeteries, underground caves, churches, and then back underground through a volcanic area for an eventual minecart romp. Then onto an underwater location, a clock tower,
You've got to have a clock tower level!
and finally the castle. Our green-haired heroine has the ability to attack with a greenish-colored whip, which she can use by whipping what's in front of her or what's above her. It's clear the developers were fans of Super Castlevania 4 because there are these hooks that allow Rusty to latch onto them with her whip, carrying her across open areas and chasms. The whip mechanics aren't as free-flowing as the aforementioned masterpiece, but lie somewhere between it and Castlevania Bloodlines. And seriously, who do I need to thank for allowing us to whip up? I wish more Castlevania games, aside from the 4th game, did this as well as Rusty did. The game also takes inspiration from the Ghouls and Ghosts series, with hidden statues spread throughout the levels. By ducking and whipping, you can usually find them, and they lead to some pretty fantastic power-ups. To start, there are secondary abilities such as the time-slowing power-up, invulnerability, the fire wheel, and my personal favorite, the owl attack. These are all activated with the jump and attack buttons being pressed at the same time, though the owl is used with each whip attack based on how many green orbs you have. Orbs are like hearts in most Castlevania games, in that they can be used as currency towards your sub-weapon attacks. These were harder to activate because Rusty had to be mostly still while pressing both the jump and attack buttons. I would have preferred the more traditional up and B or a third potential button, but since up and B is reserved for whipping up, the third potential button would have probably worked the best. These sub-weapon attacks use less orbs than the Vania titles do, though dying will knock your orb count back down to just 10. Enemies can randomly drop all sorts of items such as money or other power-ups. The money goes towards your score, which really doesn't matter that much other than gaining lives after a certain amount has been racked up. There's also health in the form of big heart pickups that fill up your life bar. Your orb meter maxes out at 50, and there's a special icon you can collect that will bring it to that max level. There's also an item that will fill the level timer back up. Yes, there's a countdown clock in this game, but the levels are usually timed with about 5 minutes on that timer, and typically you'll die way before you run out of time. Rusty will die A lot. This is definitely a game that prides itself on echoing the Castlevania franchise's difficulty, and the demand for pixel-perfect platforming is just as important here as it is in Konami's series. Generally, you start with 2 lives, but you can collect either 1-ups or these fish icons. Collect 2 of those, and you will get an extra life. Even if you collect 1, die, then collect it again. In fact, the game gives you plenty of chances to gain more lives by backtracking at points to find secret rooms. Speaking of secret rooms, level progression is blocked by specific locked doors, with the keys being based on playing card symbols. Collect the diamond, clover, heart, and spade keys throughout your journey and find tons of secrets along the way. Some of these rooms can be revisited from a checkpoint, which does cheapen the experience a bit, but it's an overall welcome blessing in disguise. You'll spend plenty of time making stupid mistakes, and Rusty is very much a trial and error game in its platforming aspects. However, anytime I died, it was typically my fault, allowing me to appreciate the proper challenge. By pressing and holding the up key in the left or right direction, Rusty will gun it at full speed, charging towards her enemies. She can also stop with a pivot turn by pressing the opposite direction as you let go of the run button. While it looks like it could have been a leeway into a shoulder slam attack, it doesn't actually do anything other than prevent you from running off a platform. It's a shame because there were plenty of times I could have used this to bash enemies, but I instead wound up just regretting the move altogether. I often thought, maybe I'm doing something wrong? Regarding the bosses, why does every single boss have their giblets hanging out? Well, it correlates with this story, oddly enough. The Count's right hand is going around grabbing these girls across the countryside and has been using them, turning some of them into horrifying enemies. One forgiving aspect of the boss battles is that when you die during a boss fight, you don't start the fight over with the enemy's life refreshed. You're able to keep chipping away at the bosses until they start to flash yellow, then red, before you can lay the final whip smack to defeat them. Now, of course, if you lose all your lives, then you do have to go back to the beginning of the level. After defeating the boss, you collect the all too familiar floating orb, and Rusty has some sort of little spin dance pose that she does before she says something, which sounds like yatta, the Japanese word for like hooray or I did it. There's all kinds of horrific sounding PCM samples. At the end of each stage, after saving the girls, they give you a bit more detail about what the Count's plans are.
What exactly are your plans, anyways?
That's easy. I want to open an Arby's every 6 miles. I mean, have you seen the social media accounts?
I know, right? I mean, I liked Arby's before they became giant video game fans. But still, great food at a great price.
Arby's, where our memes are as great tasting as our curly fries.
Most of the detail in the story during these cutscenes is pretty basic stuff, mostly just to keep you going. Think of it like in Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past, where each rescued maiden gives you a little bit more detail about what's going on. But here, the dialogue feels a bit disconnected. I don't believe that the translation performed here is inaccurate, it's just that there's some lines that really make me question where they were going with this. Take this exchange, for example.
Do you have any idea what they're talking about?
Not sure, but my guess is that quality grown-up time consists of furry handcuffs, whipped cream, and a lifetime worth of regrets.
Arby's! Our creamy horsey sauce is pleasure and pain.
What just happened?
These post-dialogue clips of the girls are sort of creepy. Look, I'm all for the celebration of the female figure, but some of these ladies look like they don't have bottom jaws or torsos.
Ah, don't worry about it. They're all over 18.
Arby's.
I think?
How would you know? They didn't have driver's licenses back then.
Arby's! Putting the curtains back into our roast beef.
Okay, the joke's dead already.
Despite a slightly stuttery frame rate, Rusty looks and sounds pretty solid. Graphically, it's certainly not holding a candle to games like Castlevania Rondo of Blood, which was released very close to this game, but it's nice to see the developers utilizing the impressive color palette for the PC-98. The in-game graphics outside of the cutscenes, while a bit rough along the edges, still resemble everything that the game is trying to portray. The art design is clever, with some really impressive bosses that look as slick as they move. The real star here is the soundtrack, which clearly pays tribute to the Castlevania atmosphere. However, Rusty's soundtrack is its own stunning audio showcase. Composed by Masahiro Kajihara, Kenichi Arakawa, and Ryu Takami, the tracks we have here are extremely well balanced between that Baroque-inspired dance and rock pieces, mixed with some awesome instrumentation. The PC-98 utilized similar hardware to the Sega Genesis when it came to sound, with the FM synth tones sounding rich and crisp. From the upbeat drums and exciting slap bass to the harmonizing melodies, these tracks will get the blood pumping and keep you engaged as you slay the undead ghouls of the night. I want to also point out that the soundtrack you're hearing during this review isn't quite accurate regarding the tempo. Rusty's soundtrack has often been questioned regarding the true speed, as the internet has clips that are both too fast and too slow. The tracks that I've highlighted today are slightly slower than the correct tempo. This mostly has to do with the way rips have been pulled for this game, as they're typically not pulled directly from the hardware, so they sound different. Rusty certainly has big shoes, or braziers, to fill when it comes to the Castlevania comparisons. Here we have a much more lewd interpretation that puts an emphasis on sex selling the experience. But when you look past the naughty glimpses and sexy nooks and crannies, Rusty's core gameplay is as engaging as it is enticing. You'll want to keep playing and get to the end, not for the story, but for the challenge. Don't let the slight frame rate issues steer you away from experiencing this one. You'll want to lust after Rusty.
What does that even mean?
It means the game's fun, Count. Why don't you make like a tree and return to the underworld?
Well, they're actually here.
Oh, okay. Say, do you know how to get back to the light world?
Go right for the eligible woods. Hit your head on Debola's cliffs.
You mean Cliff?
Nah, man, you got to motorboat your way home.
Okay, thanks?
Don't mention it.
Oh man, I'm back. Whew, what a journey it's been. And it looks like Shadow Miketendo isn't here, which is awesome. Huh. A note. Your house sucks. Why don't you have any Call of Duty games? I'm gonna go get some Arby's later. Hugs and kisses, Shadow Miketendo. Huh. Oh well. Well, I'm glad to be back. And, you know, it's kind of weird because this is the first episode, the first Halloween episode, where I didn't have any of my fellow YouTubers on in a while. Really weird. Oh well. Well, see you guys later.
Oh shit. What's going on, guys? Rewind Mike, Where the hell is everybody?
Thank you to the following patrons. Your support means the world to me. Want more Dude You Haven't Played This Game? Make sure to stay subscribed to the channel and check out these videos enclosed below. As always, thanks for watching.